Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I am going to be giving you my review of Rook by Sharon Cameron. Rook was a September-August pick for the Perustopia book club on Goodreads. Perustopia is run by Sasha from Booktopia and Regan from Peruse Project. I will link both their channels and the Goodreads group in the description below. The story follows Sophia Bellamy, who we know from the get-go is the Red Rook. The story starts off with Sophia returning from Paris to the Commonwealth, which is, I guess, formerly Britain at that time, from her latest rescue, and faces a new challenge, her engagement to Rene Hazard, who seems to be your regular, usual, floppish gentleman. Her marriage to Rene Hazard is the last chance she has to save her family's fortune and restore her brother's inheritance. But the search for the Red Rook comes straight to her doorstep, and her new fiancé is not all whom he seems to be. My first impressions of the book is I wasn't wowed by it. It was a decent read, and it was an entertaining story, but it was so slow moving in parts, and it just seemed like nothing was happening half the time, and all of the action was in like the third part of the book. The first half just seemed like nothing but social intrigue, which I guess if you like that stuff is still pretty interesting. So it wasn't easy to start or even keep going with it at times, but once you got to like that third half where all the action was starting to take place, it definitely picked up and it definitely kept my interest going. The world building of the book itself was confusing at times. Again, for the first half of the book, I had no idea how my imagination was supposed to picture this world. I couldn't grasp how the styles were being presented. I couldn't figure out if I'm supposed to be imagining revolutionary France or if there's some sort of futuristic twist on it. I know in this world technology is considered bad. In fact, the Commonwealth government had just gotten rid of Sophia's family's printing press because it was a source of technology which they considered to be bad. So I know that there was no technology involved in this world because they thought it was what brought down the destruction of the previous world, but it was still very difficult to picture what some of the things were that they were talking about, like their modes of transportation. They didn't call them wagons or carriages or anything. They called them landovers, and I had no idea how to picture these landovers. Was I picturing a carriage? Was I picturing a wagon? Was I picturing some sort of car that is pulled by horses now? Like, I had no idea how to picture a form of transportation or even the styles or anything really in the beginning of the book. It was also really hard to picture an actual futuristic sense until the middle of the book. My mind kept going back to revolutionary France because the lack of technology and the description of everything made my mind think revolutionary France. It wasn't until the middle of the book where they were discussing artifacts and the value of plastics and artifacts where my mind could actually start picturing a futuristic sense plus the French Revolutionary. So when they started discussing a piece of plastic her brother had found with the word Nintendo on it, I could okay, now I can start to picture this alternate history. Sophia's character I really didn't care for. She seemed all over the place and confused half the time. She wasn't a very strong character. I believe it was the other characters that kind of gave her strength. Her friend Spear I found so annoying. He just seemed so broody and miserable, and not in the dark brooding guy kind of way, but the broody annoying, okay, suck it up kind of way. So I found him to be rather annoying. Her brother Thomas, I couldn't just find myself any sympathy for him, any urgency for anything he was going through. The one character I did appreciate the most was Rene Hazard, who reminded me a lot of the Scarlet Pimpernel's character from the movie. The Scarlet Pimpernel in the movie is a British fop. They hardly pay him any attention because he just seems like your typical British aristocracy who only cares about the latest fashion and the way their clothing is presented. So half the time people weren't even giving him a second look, whereas there's another side to him where he is this dashing, roguish hero with a brilliant mind and just these ways of thinking out all these escapes for the prisoners. Rene's character was very similar to that. He had that foppish nature to him where he only cared about matching clothing and his beautiful gold-threaded jackets. Whereas Sophia starts to see that there is way more to him that meets the eye, and that he's actually quite brilliant in the way that he thinks up plans and schemes and strategy. The villain LeBlanc was interesting, and he was a decent villain, but I didn't find myself hating him or enjoying his villainy as much as I was creeped out and annoyed by it. LeBlanc had this creepy goddess of fate cult thing going on, which in a way could really build a villain, but in this case it was his weakness, it was his downfall, because half the time he just seemed like some whiny cult follower, and he seemed to be the only one following this weird goddess of fate cult thing, and it overtook him, and that's all he cared about, and it just made him really whiny. Like, honestly, half the time you didn't care about him, you didn't see his drive to become something more, you didn't see his desire or drive to actually get the Red Rook. It just seemed like the goddess tells me I must. There was just some depth lacking there in the villain himself. Overall, aside from the Hazards, I found most of the characters just to be very surface level. The ending did get better, however, there's a lot of things that I could see coming. There was, of course, a bit of a love triangle, which you could see off the get-go before we were even really into the book. I think it was like by the second, third chapter, I could totally see that coming from a mile away. There's some other things that just kind of lined up also nicely that you could really figure them out before they happened. And the ending just seemed like they were just throwing a bunch of things together. There's like one thing that surprised me that I didn't see coming that fit really well and actually made sense, but the rest of it just seemed like we need to wrap this up really quickly, so let's just wrap it all up. And it was wrapped up very nicely, but at the same time it was like, what I mean, it could have been done with a lot more of a wow factor to it. I felt a lot of the action, though, leading up to that, when we finally hit the action, was really well done. So my thoughts overall, it was a slow-moving book. However, it was well written. The writing in it was very good. The way she told her story was really well done. I did enjoy the author's writing as it was. The characters were surface level, minus, of course, Renee Hazard, who of course reminded me of the Scarlet Pimpernel from the movie. I can't remember his real name right now or the actor that plays him, but Renee reminded me so much of him, which is why I liked his character so much. The intrigue and everything was really well written. However, I would have liked to seen it done a little bit better, where like you didn't see as much coming. I did give this book a 3.5 rating on Goodreads, just because once we did hit the action and the actual plan making and rescuing bits, I really did enjoy it. I really got into that action part. It was kind of like the beginning and the ending, which I didn't like. So the middle part was very good, which is why I gave it a 3.5 rating. As for language, it was pretty mild, if not all out clean. This was one of those books that kind of made up its own emphasis words, or curse words you can call them, but they weren't really curse words, if you know what I mean. So there wasn't actually usage of language in the book, which I really appreciated. The creepy God's fate cult thing got a little weird at some points, but it wasn't in your face all the time, and it was pretty short-lived. As for sexual content, it was pretty mild. There was a makeout scene in a linen closet that was there, but other than that, everything else was pretty non-existent. So I did give it a, I don't know, PG-13, PG-14 rating. The violence did get a little bloody at times, especially when they started talking about the executions and the way the machine was. They never called it the guillotine, they called it the razor. So I had a lot of trouble actually picturing what this was, because my mind kept trying to picture the guillotine, but the description told me otherwise, but I couldn't picture it. Again, I think that went a little bit with the world building that I had trouble with. But as for violence, there was some bloody scenes in there, especially with the actual beheading parts. The fighting scenes weren't bad. As for gore or blood, I think it was just the execution part that was the bloody part. For most of my reviews, you will see at the end I will try to give a content rating, just to give people a little heads up of what to expect in the book, just because I appreciate that, and I really enjoy it when people on Goodreads have given me that rating, because there are things in books that I don't appreciate reading and I don't want to read about, and so I like it when there's kind of those heads up, this is in the book, so I know whether or not I'm going to read it. So this was my first book club reading as well as my first book review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I want to start doing some more book reviews in the future. If you have read this book, Sasha and Regan are doing their live show on September 23rd, and I believe it is on Sasha's channel. Like I said, I will link both their channels and the Goodreads group in the description below. I recommend you come join us. I think it's really fun to at least join one reading group on Goodreads. I was really happy I decided to do so. And I really enjoyed doing a book review, so I hope to be bringing more of those in the future. Please let me know what you thought in the comments below. I would like to get some feedback from you guys. So let's chat it up. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.